we have discussed on this program today what I would call random acts of violence, and they're not getting so random anymore. It seems like they're getting regular acts of violence. And as it happened, Trey Smith, who to a man, everybody that I've talked to is a stand-up individual, found himself in a position in which he needed to render aid to a young man during the Chiefs Super Bowl victory. Um, Caleb, I think it speaks to a couple of things that I have learned. Um, and one is that these are not the wild and crazy guys that you hear about on North Dallas 40 or even that movie with Jamie Foxx in it. There is not as much of that as you would believe. These are pros, even at the college level. And the other thing that I've learned is primarily these are good men. And I have to be honest with you, and I don't mean this as a way of suppressing what he did. I'm just not surprised. I'm not surprised from what I've heard of Trey Smith that he would stop, potentially endanger himself, and give us the whole backstory, Caleb, because Trey Smith was there during a shooting at the Super Bowl championship parade. Nobody would begrudge anybody from running away from gunfire, right? I mean, we all think that we're going to be superheroes in that situation, but we really don't know until we're put in that situation. Trey Smith was put in that situation. I'm not surprised at all. He acted like an exemplary human. I've had the opportunity, Caleb, to talk about Trey a lot with Cooper Mays. So let me get your thoughts. We have a lot of fun on the program, but this is a very serious thing. Absolutely.
So we don't know for sure yet if this was after the gunfire had stopped or while it was going on. But what we do know is that there were some kids. There were a lot of kids at this parade. There were 9 kids that were hit with gunfire yesterday. Fortunately, none of them have died so far. I mean, it's just 21 people are in the hospital right now. Were hit. Another person, a beloved local DJ, has unfortunately passed away. Um, at I don't know if this was right after or during, but Trey Smith and a couple of other Chiefs players actively got involved to calm down kids that you can imagine how traumatized kids are after something like this.
Imagine how
And
traumatized we would be. I mean, I think there's a lot of fully grown adults that might not keep their stuff together, to be real honest with you.
I agree. I agree. And Trey Smith, Blaine Gabbert, there were a couple of other players, according to Albert Breer of SI.com. I want to give them all a quick shout out. Austin Ryder and Chris Oladukin all rallied. Smith apparently went to one very upset kid, gave him a WWE title belt, and just sat with him until he calmed down. Just sat with him the whole time until he calmed down. And, it seems like so minimal in a certain way, but it's so big in another way because it's the kind of guy Trey Smith is, where you can tell just he has a genuine human. He's the type of guy that has a genuine human connection with people. And he's always been that type of person. And I mean, you think for the greater good, help the masses, but Trey Smith will come across one person, no matter how, whatever they need, he will try to be there to do it. And that's what he does. And it's just, I can't say enough for Trey Smith in that situation. And I'm with you. It's not that surprising. If you had told me ahead of this that Kansas City is going to have one player that takes an active role in helping out amidst or after the shooting in a heroic way, and you have to pick who that player is, Dave, I would probably pick Trey Smith before anybody else. And that's crazy to think about, but I would. I mean, he's just that good of a guy.
Yeah, I would have too, based off talking to Cooper Mays, and I'm very blessed to get that sort of access about what he thinks about Trey, and he practically considers Trey Smith to be a brother right alongside with Cade Mays. So I mean that's pretty strong. I'm an only child, but I would imagine Caleb, you have a brother. To say somebody that you're as close to as your brother is a pretty strong statement. I believe firmly that yes, Trey Smith would have been one of those guys. And I believe that the perception either needs to change or has to change. I was talking to Cooper for the Vol report yesterday, and I was like, I want to take you to dinner just to thank you for being there, or lunch or whatever. And he goes, well, I've got workouts. So mandatory breakfast from 8 in the morning till basically 3 in the afternoon. Then we get about a 3 hour break, and then we have to go back for mandatory dinner and meetings. Guys, these are full-time employees. These are not. You think of North Dallas 40. Those, are you old enough to remember that movie?
I've never seen North Dallas 40. I
Okay,
need to see it.
it is it's basically about the Cowboys of the 90s, but they said it in the 70s. They were ahead of the curve, and they were wild, and they treated women poorly, and they did a lot of drugs. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys, that is not the athletes that we have been visiting with when it comes to Jacob Horn and Cooper Mays. And those off the record conversations, I'm telling you, those are not the type of players that are on Tennessee's team. I think it speaks to society and the fact that these guys realize they have an opportunity, Caleb, in front of them, and they're way more mature. I mean, remember the Fulmer Cup, how people talk about how many players are getting in trouble? I can say this with zero reservation. You're rooting for a bunch of good dudes. To get to that level nowadays, it's become so specialized that I think if you're lazy, you get weeded out. But I think if you're a bad dude, a bad teammate, you get weeded out as well. So I would just like to pass that along. Is you're rooting for not just great people that we work with, but you were rooting for Trey Smith, and you'll be rooting for other players that will one day do a very similar thing. Unfortunately, these shootings are going to happen again, but I've been astounded by how great of guys these have been, getting to know them through the Vol report. And it's why, honestly, whether or not it's profitable, I told Caleb, or I'm sorry, I told Cooper, I want to keep doing this. It's kind of a break even for Off the Hook Sports, to be real honest with you. But I want him to have the money, and I want him to have a place, unlike a press conference, that he can express his feelings. And he's just a good guy, man. I just, the perception is so much different from the wild ones back in the day, Caleb, from what I've found over the past 2 years.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's funny because everybody talks about how everybody complains about today's players, but I think by and large today's players in the NFL are so much better behaved than players 50 years ago. Largely, I mean, and look, there's an economic situation. Players 50 years ago did not get the medical treatment they needed for maybe mental health issues and head issues. They didn't have the financial means to be good guys, if you want to say that. Whereas now there's a lot more protections for them, but I mean, it's sad because like when Antonio Brown acts like Antonio Brown, who I think we can probably agree is the worst human being to play in the NFL of the last, one of the worst human beings to play in the NFL the last 10 years, right? He, like, in terms of character, he's at the bottom.
Other than murderers.
Yes, exactly. But well, yeah, I said that's why I said one of. Okay, but yes, Aaron Hernandez is at the bottom, but I'm talking about just not going extreme. Antonio Brown is one of the worst human beings. Most NFL players aren't like that, guys. Most NFL players are trying to make a living, feed their families, do right by the people that drafted them. They're humans like all of us. And I think that Trey Smith, even by that standard, is just so much better. There's a former Chief, Dave, that you covered who fits this bill, who played for Tennessee too, and that's Eric Berry. And it was pre-NIL, but Eric Berry, was he not one of the like, he's somebody you want dating your daughter, isn't he?
No.
And
Exactly. And I'll tell you this too. And I'm not trying to take advantage of the situation, because we promote them because they're a partner, they're a client, but it's never been more apropos to promote our friends at Harrell Group Security Solutions, because this is what they do. Harrell Group Security Solutions provides security to your workplace, security to your school, your children's school, and they're working with private schools now. We want to work with public schools. So go to harrellgrp.com, or just Google Harrell Group Security Solutions, and make sure that your workplace is safe. These are highly trained individuals. I'm not going to get into politics, but the public schools the security guards they hire, and this is me saying this, not Harrell Group Security Solutions, are not Green Berets. Okay. A lot of these guys are. These are highly trained individuals, and we can make this work, and we want to get into public schools. That's the next step for all of this. So it's a serious topic to lead off the show, but God bless all of those that have gone through that terrible situation in Kansas City. And kudos to Trey Smith. I just I can't say enough about that young man and what he was able to do yesterday. There is no good transition really to move on, but we are going to be able to do that. Anything else you would like to say about Trey Smith at this point?
No, I think you spoke it pretty good, and this is the Trey Smith that we all knew. This is the Trey Smith that threw away being a top 3 round pick in the NFL to come back for a senior season because he wanted to fulfill a promise to his late mother to graduate
Tell
before he
that
went to the
story
pros.
again, though, for those that don't know, because I mean, especially with the blood clots, he should have gotten the heck out of Dodge. I mean, as soon as he could, right?
Yes, for those who don't remember, this was pre NIL, so he wasn't making any money. And Trey Smith was an all SEC guard 3 years in a row. He was a highly touted NFL draft pick. The blood clots were the concern, but at this point, coming after 2019, it seemed like he was still going to be a pretty high draft pick because he had so much potential. He still decided to come back for his senior year. And he said he was going to do it because his mother, who was dying of cancer, her dying wish was for him to graduate. And he said he was going to graduate before he went to the NFL. He graduated, so he chose to come back. Within a month of choosing to come back, Dave, COVID hits. Trey Smith, blood clots in his lungs. Nobody's more vulnerable to COVID than Trey Smith.
Yeah.
And Trey Smith played the whole season. Tennessee had a disastrous season that partially hurt his draft stock. But I think to this day, I guarantee you Trey Smith would do it all over again if he could, because it has worked out and he has fulfilled his late promise and he's an NFL player.
Totally agree. And I think I mentioned this yesterday. My concern with Trey Smith always was that Trey Smith might have fatigue from the medicine that he took. So beforehand, Charles Hathaway, when he was a Tennessee basketball player, when you pretty much got blood clots, it wasn't necessarily the blood clots that killed you or ended your career. It was the medicine and fighting through that. So Trey Smith was able to do that. 7th-round pick. He is, well, I guess you could say Brock Purdy since he plays quarterback, but Trey Smith is the second best deal right now in the NFL, and he's about to get paid, and he absolutely deserves it. There is no good transition from something so serious, and you are in our prayers, thoughts and prayers, Kansas City. I've been so close to flipping from a Dallas Cowboys fan, which I've been all my life, to a Kansas City fan. Trey Smith might push it over the top. And it would be so bandwagon because they're winning, but I tend to root for people, Caleb, more than I root for jerseys. I don't know. I didn't cover any of the current Dallas Cowboys. There's a part of me that just wants to be a Chiefs fan, and that's not just because they're winning. But I guess I'll hold tight because I think a true fan sticks with his team. But Kansas City played the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl. I might not say it, but it would be difficult for me not to root for Kansas City and Trey Smith.